Hi, I'm Teddy.
And I'm Arthur.
You're listening to Trish Zornio on Two Broads Talking Politics.
Bye, everyone.
Are you listening?
Welcome back, everyone, to Two Broads Talking Politics. As usual, I am one of your co-hosts, Sophie, and I'm here with your other co-host, Kelly. Hey, Kelly.
Hey, Sophie.
And joining us today is Trish Zornio. She is running for U.S. Senate from Colorado in 2020. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks so much for joining us. Can you tell us a little bit, just sort of introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us about who you are and why you decided to run for Senate?
Absolutely. I think for me, this really got started several years ago when I was in DC for work and I was sitting in on the United States Senate Science Committee hearing. And I started realizing that there were no scientists on the Science Committee. And then I traveled down the hall to the Education and Healthcare Committee and found something very similar. And I had this moment where, as a scientist and an educator by training who has worked in hospitals and clinics and universities through that science, I realized that there was a need that I wanted to start to fill. And so I have been working with patients and families for almost 15 years, trying to help improve outcomes and really further the understanding that we have in medicine and technology and treatments for conditions. And I really wanted to start seeing a lot of that applied because so much of what we have here today in 2019 is influenced by science in one way or another. And when we don't have any experts on that highest level federal science committee actually partaking in those decisions with their expertise, we're limiting ourselves as Americans for what we can accomplish. And whether it's climate change or healthcare or any number of other issues like data security and more, we have to take a data-driven approach. And so I got started in this because I wanted to see representation that I didn't feel that we had.
Speaking of representation that's not in the Senate, you are pretty young. I believe not only would you be the youngest senator if you're elected, the youngest one right now I think is Josh Hawley, who's 39, but as far as I can tell, you would be the youngest woman ever elected to the Senate. Can you talk a little bit about that in terms of the Senate average age is something like 61. It's not particularly young, and what having younger voices in the Senate might mean.
I think it really changes the way that we look at things. So, for example, my generation, I'm in my mid-30s, so I'm 33, I'll be 34 in a couple months. And I think this is something that, we just look at things a little bit differently, as every generation does. We have a different experience. And so, for example, the way in which we talk about healthcare, for my generation, I've never had jobs where healthcare was always tied to it. I've only had a handful of jobs that had healthcare. And in fact, the job I have right now doesn't even have healthcare tied to it. And so this idea that, a lot of the way that we talk about issues just has to change to keep up with the momentum of the economy and where we are today. And we see that in lots of different ways, whether it's student debt issues or whether it's representation as related to technology. We have a lot of senators that have said things to, people like Mark Zuckerberg and asked, well, how do you don't sell any products. How do you make any money? And for anyone, who's accustomed with these technologies, that's an insane proposition to ask a U.S. senator to have that question asked. And so, I think this is something that when I look at this, having a younger generation come in can help shape out and round the perspective. We certainly don't want all 34-year-olds, but, I think it would be helpful to consider that round perspective. And so when we talk about adding the woman's perspective to that age, one of the things that's relevant here in Colorado is that we have never elected a woman to the United States Senate ever. In 142 years, we have never done it. And it's, again, not because I'm asking people to vote for me because I'm a woman, but it's the expertise that I bring and the perspectives that come with that in everything from shaping women's health. So, for example, I can tell you the Georgia law that was just passed, where it's a 6-week ban, and it's literally putting women who have miscarriages, they can be charged with murder and have life in prison. we have men making these decisions for us with our healthcare and our bodies that are not even fully informed perspectives. And we have to have women at the table to make these decisions. And so between the age and the woman component, I think it's something that, it would be really novel for Coloradans to adapt to and send forward. And especially with the science background, it's just a combination that we have never seen in the U.S. Senate.
As most of our listeners know, 2 days ago there was a shooting at the STEM school, Highlands Ranch, which is a school in the suburbs of Denver. And one person was killed and 8 people were injured. So I imagine gun violence is on, a lot of people's minds in Colorado. Can you talk a little bit about gun violence in Colorado and sort of what you would be hoping to do as a senator to address it?
Yeah, and for starters, I just certainly want to extend, I actually know a lot of people in the community here. It's only 25, 30 minutes from my house where this happened. So I know a lot of parents who had their children in these schools, and I deeply am affected by that. And I send my thoughts for sure, but we know that thoughts and prayers are simply not enough at this point. No amount of thoughts and prayers is going to solve this. And I think it is an absolute tragedy that we are failing our children. We have children in schools right now who are being shot point blank. We had children yesterday at this school shooting. We have children who were seen outside of the school as they were fleeing from this gunman, applying pressure to their friends' gunshot wounds on the back, sitting on a lawn, and a neighbor came over and tried to help them. And this is the sort of stuff, we have children lunging at gunmen that would make someone in the army proud with what they're doing. This is a war scene at this point. And I just think it is so ridiculous that we know what to do. Whether it is the research that was done after Sandy Hook, there was a 3-pronged strategy that was discussed. It's not only, we talk a lot about the need for gun safety reform, and we do need to do that. And there's a lot of different things. In fact, the American College of Physicians has outlined a very comprehensive platform that includes everything from the very basics, like closing the loopholes for background checks, all the way to things like safe storage laws and ending the ability to purchase guns if you have misdemeanors of things like stalking charges. But it has to be so much more than that. There has to be things that focus on the mental health component. So that after Sandy Hook, some of the research that was done, they showed that certainly addressing mental health, but especially focusing on the social emotional learning in schools and what it means to cope and manage the thoughts that come through that. So that there's definitely a lot of different things we can be doing. And then the other aspect of this is that, we see that violence increases with poverty. And when we're not addressing some of the larger systemic aspects in our nation that are happening, like more and more people being at or below poverty or barely above it, working multiple jobs, we know that this impacts the general mental health of a society, and we know that violence increases in these moments. And so this is going to take much more than thoughts and prayers, and we actually know a lot of the starting answers. What we don't have is the leaders in office right now who are willing to fight for this. I have friends who are terrified to send their children to school. This morning we woke up and there are 3 more schools within 30 minutes from my house on lockdown for active shooter threats. 3 more right after the shooting that we just had. This has to end. It's an epidemic. It's a public health crisis. We have to end it. And we have to get everyone from lots of different perspectives involved, but we have to get leaders who will make this a priority. And it's proving really challenging here in Colorado, especially. We have a number of recalls that are happening because we just passed, for the first time, we passed a red flag law, which is something that we absolutely need to be doing. And we have a particular group that is coming out, and the NRA-backed folk are coming out, and they are trying to enact recalls for the senators and House reps who actually went down this path of passing it. And I think it's just a tragedy. We have to do everything we can to fix this. And I am ready to take this on. My nephew is 9 years old, and he calls me and he says, he told me recently, he said, well, don't worry about me because now that I'm taller, I can climb out of the window faster. And he goes to the same school I went to. And we have to be back.
Yeah. So you have now been to all 64 counties in Colorado. What are you hearing from people as you're talking to them? Obviously, gun violence is an issue, but what are the other kinds of things that there really is on their minds right now?
It's a great question, and it's been so much fun doing this tour. We're actually starting our second 64 county tour. We're already about 10 counties in, and we're really trying to do it in part to send the message that we're listening. And so when we go, we have heard pretty consistent themes across the state, which happen to be the areas of expertise that I fall into. And so 3 things that we've heard is that people are ready for healthcare that is affordable and accessible, because we have to keep in mind that not everyone actually even has even just basic access to healthcare right now. And so this is something that we're hearing consistently, and people are ready for big change on that front. It's not just about going back to the ACA. It's about expanding and making sure that every single person has comprehensive healthcare in America. And we can do this. It's economically savvy, and people are understanding that. Here in America, we spend more than any other nation on healthcare, and we have some of the worst outcomes. Particularly some of those outcomes affect marginalized communities much more so. And it's something that we need to be taking very seriously. And I've been finding that in this tour, people of all political stripes are interested in coming together to make this happen. The second thing we hear a lot about is education. Education here in Colorado especially has been deeply impacted by funding cuts. And I think that's something that we're seeing nationwide, in addition to the violence and everything that's happening. And people are really wanting to see a deep investment in the next generations that we simply haven't been doing. And the third thing that we're finding that is resonating with the majority of Coloradans, I have talked to some of the most staunch Trump supporters from 2016 who are ready to change their perspective on this. We are actually seeing a lot of impetus for addressing climate change. And the reason for that is because Colorado, of all the 50 states, we're actually getting hit much harder. And there's a variety of reasons for that, but it is deeply impacting particularly a lot of our agricultural sectors, and people who are in rural communities are experiencing some of the worst fallouts from this. We have people who are sharing with us, I'm touring their farms, and they're showing us this amazing land that they have, except their irrigation ditch has been dry since the beginning of the growing season in May or early June. And they, instead of producing, say, 650 bales of alfalfa, end up producing about 52 in that season. And they're losing thousands and thousands of dollars. I had another Trump supporter actually tell us that they lost $10,000 this particular year due to Trump's trade wars. So people are really paying attention to this idea of addressing the climate and economic issues surrounding climate, and they're ready for action that will help them transition and be economically stable in that space that we're moving into with this greening economy and a change in our climate that's not going to allow the same sorts of practices to be held. And so I think, those 3 things, healthcare, education, and addressing environment, it's part of Colorado just to be really focused on these top issues and coming together. We are a state that's very mixed. We are not a Democratic state yet. We did go full blue for the first time in 2018, actually, since the 1930s. But we also have, the seat I'm looking to run for right now is currently held by one of the most conservative senators in the United States. For example, not only is he the number 4 funded senator for NRA-backed money, he is also someone who hasn't even acknowledged that we are contributing to climate change. He's not even sure if he's convinced that this is really happening. This is the sort of person that we have in office, and he's actively taking away healthcare, and he's doing all the things that as Coloradans we're ready to tackle. So we're hoping that we can really bond together, and I'm hearing people are ready to do it.
And he is also the 5th least popular senator in the country.
Oh, that is definitely true. But I think we have to be realistic and know that while there is a door open here, and he is vulnerable by all means, it's not going to be an easy fight. It's still an uphill battle, and we're putting in the effort. And it has to be more than this. It's not just that we're about trying to flip the seat, right? This is about trying to create a movement in Colorado that can bring neighbors together and really try to create a grassroots feel so that we can enact policy that's relevant, not just now, but for the future. It's something that I'm particularly passionate about, especially from the science perspective, is we're getting to the point where technology is outpacing our ability to legislate. And if we don't have people looking forward and being progressive, which I would argue, since the antonym of progress is actually regress, we should all be interested in being progressive. We have to start taking that more seriously as technology is moving so quickly. And I think this is something that, we're just finding people are ready for, and he is one of the least liked senators. So hopefully that's in our favor.
I'm thrilled to hear that people are finally taking climate change seriously. It's 30 years later than it should have been, but, at least people are still finally taking it seriously. What are some of the policies that you would like to see enacted to start to address climate change?
Ooh, such a great topic. It's actually so much bigger. So we talk a lot about the energy and transportation sectors, but that is actually only about 50% of the greenhouse gases that are emitted right now. And so we absolutely need to be talking about those two sectors, but we need to be looking at a variety of other things that can come in a little bit more quickly. And then also, how do we plan for the long term as we start transitioning? So, for example, some of the easiest things that we could start to tackle is food waste. And that sounds insanely simple in some ways, to think that, food waste is something that would help contribute so immensely. But a lot of the data actually shows that if we started making big efforts into changing the way that we consume and often just discard food, and that has to do with storage, etc., we could even make some huge impacts in something as simple as that. So that, it can have some really immediate impacts. And then you have things like working on renewable and sustainable energies to be able to actually transition out toward that 100%. But right now, from the science perspective, we're nowhere near a 100% renewable and sustainable grid. And so we have to start planning for developing the technologies that are required to actually make the next level of science possible, so that we can start having those conversations, in the next 5 to 10 years after policies are implemented. I think the trouble is that right now, the climate change research is so robust at this point that we have to acknowledge that this is an economic issue more than anything else. We don't get the luxury anymore of choosing whether or not we want to address this. We are going to address this one way or another. And we can either address it preemptively, and yes, it's going to cost us a little bit to do that, but it's going to cost us a lot less than if we don't do anything and things continue to get worse and we don't mitigate potential damage. The military actually has acknowledged this as a top issue since 2007, especially. And so, we need to take this seriously, not only for climate purposes, but for national security purposes, for economic and public health issues. These are all tied together. And I think the way you do that is starting to fund the science to make that happen. And unfortunately, we're going to be in a time crunch, because the fastest this can really happen with our current leadership, it's not going to. So, 2020, if we can sweep this 2020 election, we flip seats like the one that I'm running for, and we, get a majority in the Senate, keep the House, and change the presidency for people who want to address this as the top level threat that it is, then the fastest we could start making change is 2021. And we're getting into a tight timeline. So we have to, from day one, increase drastically the basic science research that can help us increase battery storage technologies, especially because we don't have the ability to do transmission and battery storage that's needed for 100% renewable and sustainable grids. So these are the sorts of things that, we have to come in swinging day one, start with some simple stuff coupled with long-term, and slowly start making those movements. The other thing we need to do is start letting people know that, again, it's beyond just the energy and transportation sectors. So we have to alert companies that are using derivatives of these products. So things like plastics, we need to ban single-use plastics outright. And we need to let people know this is going to be coming. So you need to prepare your brands for this change, right? And so you start coming out of the gate with a series of proposals that you can enact and a series of proposals that you will enact, such that people can be ready for that change, so you don't catch anyone blind. And then you need transition programs. So this is something that's really important for particularly a lot of rural areas, especially. So people like, actually, I have people in my family who were caught up in this transition from, older technologies for energy, and now we're transitioning into the renewables And I have family that have lost their jobs from this, and it's not a good place to be. And we need to make sure that there is a just transition for those people who are having to make that transition against their interests sometimes. And so we have to make that in their interest economically to make that viable. And these are, things that we have to do actually all in tandem, because you're right, we've waited way too long and we are going to have much bigger proposals than we ever would have had to 10, 20, 30 years ago, because we have to compensate for that. So, it's going to be a big comprehensive sort of approach. And, but step one is we have to flip this seat. It's the biggest thing we can do.
Since Cory Gardner is seen as potentially the most vulnerable Republican senator right now, it's also attracted a lot of people on the Democratic side to run. It's a pretty crowded primary already. What is it like to sort of run both a primary, thinking about, how to position yourself vis-a-vis the other Democrats, but also then need to be thinking about running in the general?
Yeah, I think, the whole point is that I'm coming at this from a really unique way. So for starters, I am the only person who has been on the ground for a couple of years now, actually. We did that full 64 county exploratory tour, and we did it because we knew that we had to create a viable grassroots movement. And so we have made connections all across the state to make sure that we were ahead of the curve and taking this seat seriously and this election seriously. And the beauty of coming from the science side is actually that, we're finding I don't have to tailor my messages or sort of try to, think about how I would do things a little differently in the primary versus the general, because really at the end of the day, what we're trying to create is a new way of doing this. We're trying to create community connections and work together across party lines to make the best decisions possible and make sure that we are integrating those perspectives into the campaign. So, when we want to talk about how to transition the agricultural sectors to make sure that we have in this green economy a sector that's going to be functional, we include people who are from that agricultural sector and experts in these areas. And we have meetings and we go out and tour the farms and we learn about these things firsthand. And I think that's just a very different approach. It's often about kind of pithy one-liners and, how much fundraising can you do from people who are incredibly wealthy and, the 1%. And, we're doing it differently. We have a grassroots strategy. We have people who are, our average donation is incredibly low. It's, something around like $45, $50 right now. I don't even know if it's that high actually. And we have people who are doing huge volunteer efforts to make this happen. And so we're building what we hope is a movement much more so than any sort of short-term political strategy. We want this to carry on past this election. This is a group that we are building across the state to make change that matters to communities.
If people are listening and would like to help out with your campaign, how can they do that?
They can visit our website. It is Zornio, that's spelled Zornio, 2020.com. We have contact information, tour information if they'd like to host a gathering for us and introduce us to your friends. Or if you would like to chip in a few dollars to our efforts, that would be most appreciated. And thank you so much.
And Colorado is a lovely place to visit. So anyone from outside Colorado wants to plan your vacations around campaigning. Not that I do that or anything. Colorado is a great one.
It is. It's beautiful. I'm actually getting ready to head out to the Western Slope, which means I have to cross up and over the mountains, the Continental Divide, and it's beautiful. It's absolutely lovely.
Well, Trish, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today, and thank you for running. We love women who are running for office, and it's very exciting to see a woman who's not just younger than me, but younger than Sophie, which is unusual on this podcast. So thank you so much for stepping up and running for office.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and I'm really excited to be having this conversation.
Thanks for listening to Two Broads Talking Politics. Our theme song is called Are You Listening? Off of the album Elephant Shaped Trees by the band Immunuri, and we're using it with permission of the band. Our logo and other original artwork is by Matthew Weflin and was created for use by this podcast.